Hello, Frizzle Fleet. When I read my first Murderbot Diaries book 2 years ago, I was hooked, and it's only continued and intensified from there. Until now, here by book 7, I am fully obsessed. System Collapse picks up pretty much exactly where book 5, Network Effect, left off. In book 5, things got intense. Murderbot and its human friends got into a bunch of different fights on this creepy planet that's kind of infested with alien virus malware that makes people go crazy. Murderbot itself was briefly infected with this alien virus, but was purged and healed at the end of book 5. But now we pick up here, System Collapse, and Team Murderbot is still hanging around the planet. And the big conflict of this book is we have the settlers of the planet who have been there for decades. And then we have the big bad corporations coming in and wanting to take over the planet. But in order to do this, they have to get rid of those pesky colonists. So their plan is to trick the colonists into signing away their lives into corporate slavery. So the big goal of Team Murderbot is to help the colonists resist this. And I feel like the opening of this book is so strong because it opens up with Murderbot on the planet, and everyone constantly apologizing to it. Like, oh, Murderbot, we know that you didn't want to be here on this planet, but we really needed you, and thank you so much for coming, and we're so sorry we made you come back here. We know it's traumatic for you. And I'm like, ooh, juicy. Because the events of book 5 were certainly very traumatic for Murderbot, and I get why it wouldn't want to come back to the planet, but it also has me wondering, is this all? Or is there something else that has happened between the time frame of these 2 books that made Murderbot hate this planet even more? And the response we get from Murderbot to all this friendly concern is also intriguing because Murderbot doesn't want to talk about it, is not telling the reader what the problem is. In fact, it's just like redacted in the book. And so it sets up this little mystery of what is this damage that is causing Murderbot to react this way. And just like many books in the series before it, you know that when something's set up like this, you're going to get it at some point in the book. What is this interesting flashback that we're teasing here? And Murderbot's behavior does feel extra traumatized. It's always zoning out and pausing and going even more into terrible anxiety spirals. So then, when we finally got the answer of what is this redacted mystery, what is the big deal, honestly, I was a little underwhelmed. And if there's one thing that I would nitpick about this book, it would be that, because it's built up so high. And then it turns out that all it is that Murderbot, had a PTSD flashback and passed out once, just from the events of book 5. But the way that all of the friends were carrying on, I was thinking this was a big new thing that had happened. And later in the book, Murderbot does have another little shutdown because of PTSD flashbacks, but it doesn't actually become important to the plot again. This isn't actually a big problem for it. It happened once and it happens a little time again, but there aren't any negative consequences due to all of these flashbacks. It's just like an excuse to manufacture drama within the team and why Murderbot doesn't want to go back to the planet. But you could have just said, Murderbot doesn't want to go back to the planet because the last time it was there, it was infected with a hostile virus. And I think that would have been just as strong, if not stronger, of a propulsion for this plot than this mystery that seems like it's building up to a big thing and then turns out to be not as important or exciting as the build-up would make you think. So then we get our next turning point in the story where the team on the planet discover that there's another group of colonists that they didn't realize existed until now. So now they have to send a new team out to go warn the colonists and make sure they don't sell themselves into corporate slavery. And they don't really have the time to send anyone else except for the people who are already on the planet. The team with Murderbot in it. And of course, Murderbot is the most qualified of the team members to go into a potentially dangerous situation, even if it really doesn't want to be on the planet and none of its friends want it to be there because they know that this is somewhat triggering for Murderbot. But they go off to the North Pole. This is something that I really want to praise here, especially in contrast to some of the previous books in the series, which have really struggled with this, which is having a small, focused cast of side characters. Some of the books in the series, and I think the most valid criticism of the series, the casts are really big and the characters don't get all that fleshed out. But this, we just have Murderbot and the few side characters that were already on the team there that can already go to the North Pole. And what's more, there's a bunch of signal interference from the terraform machines, blah, 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 so they can't call out for help. They can't even chat and talk with all of the other side characters. So our cast is immediately condensed to only these few. There's only one new side character. Everyone else we've gotten to know in some previous books. And it raises the stakes that they can't call for help, because if they run into trouble here, they don't have the access of everyone else on the team. It's just them that have to solve the problem. So that was fantastic, and I felt like it was really one of the strengths of this book that they did restrict the cast so much. We even have 𝐼𝐎𝐿𝐒, the AI spaceship, who gets to come along as a little drone, and 𝐼𝐎𝐿𝐒 is always a joy because it's a huge sarcastic robot. That's just like the vibe of this series. So then they arrive at this North Pole location, and if this book was following the very typical Murderbot formula, there would be lots of danger here, and Murderbot would really have to step up with its awesome punching abilities and maybe stretch itself and learn some new skills in that area, and also learn some things about friendship and autonomy and trying to heal its trauma along the way. But this book, it kind of flips that on its head, which is something that I thought was so refreshing. They get to this mysterious colony in the North Pole, and it's just a normal colony. Like, there are just normal people. They aren't even, like, infested with the alien virus. It's just, like, all safe and normal. Except the corporates are already there, spreading their slavery is fun propaganda. So then the problem becomes not one of, can Murderbot learn to punch good enough in this book? The problem instead becomes, can the team convince these people of the evil of this corporation? It's not a physically active antagonist. It's an antagonist that Murderbot will have to defeat by tapping into its emotions and finding ways to connect emotionally with other people. It's directly forcing emotional growth in Murderbot because it's been through corporate slavery before. It has first-hand account of how terrible it can get. But is it brave enough to share? And what's more, the solution that Team Murderbot comes up with, because talking with the colonists isn't working out too well, Murderbot's not the best at talking, is they decide to make a documentary about the terrible corporations, which is right up Murderbot's alley because its special interest is video, is all this media. It loves soap operas and even sometimes some educational documentaries. If there's one art form to give to Murderbot, it is making videos. And so it gets to make a video with the help of its human friends about corporations and about its experience in that hellscape. And it was just so cathartic to see Murderbot's interests and character development getting married together so well in this solution and project. Seeing directly that all of the work that Murderbot's gone through to rewire its own brain and to really accept all of these horrors that were done to it and try to move past, like, directly helps another group of people and directly helps Murderbot itself. Because one of the other things that's been going back and forth in this series is, like, Murderbot freed itself from this corporate slavery, but it's been somewhat hesitant to go and free other robots. And it's done it a few times throughout the series, or offered to do it a few times, oftentimes to bad results, where the enemy combatants that Murderbot is trying to free, like, don't accept it. And I feel like a big part of Murderbot's journey is it learning that it deserves its freedom, that this is a net positive in its life. Because some days it does definitely feel like a net positive, but there's been many moments over the series where Murderbot feels like it doesn't quite want free will, like it's a lot easier just to have people tell you what to do all the time. And we, as the audience, know that, like, being out of slavery is obviously the better option. But for Murderbot, it's taken it a while to really come to that conclusion. Come to the conclusion that not only is freedom good for it, but that it deserves this freedom because it's fundamentally a person. Which is another thing that Murderbot has been wrestling with the whole series, is, like, its personhood. Because it's so easy just to be seen as an appliance with no expectations on you, and it kind of craves that sometimes. But getting the responsibility of being a person also gets you all the rights and great things about being a person. So then here in this book, when Murderbot makes a documentary about how terrible corporate slavery is and how these people deserve to stand up for themselves and reject this, it's also in a lot of ways accepting that it deserves this freedom, that it deserves to be out of the hands of the corporates, that this is its right, and in a way, like, symbolically claiming that right of personhood for itself. And we see that as things heat up after this documentary thing, because of course we revert to the normal and wonderful, honestly, Murderbot formula of now it's time to punch some things because those corporates are now angry. And they brought some sec units along. They brought their own bots. And Murderbot gets to do punchy with some of them, and we get some nice action scenes. Yeah, awesome, well written, and I liked them. But Murderbot also offers freedom, and some of the bots take it and then help Murderbot and friends escape. And this isn't easy for Murderbot. Murderbot has some trust issues, and suddenly giving someone who has the ability to like kill all your friends free will can be kind of daunting. But Murderbot does it anyway because it's had this character development over the course of the series with all these little interactions with people and with bots finally coming to this state where it acknowledges that the bots deserve freedom and therefore it deserves its own freedom. So yes, this is a fun story with cute banter and fun relationships and cool exploration, but it's also a story that on a deeper level is telling one of emancipation. It's a story of a person using their special talents to teach a message to someone else that they needed to learn themselves as well. And I really loved this book. I felt like even though it's longer than the typical Murderbot novella, it justifies every single one of those pages and the pacing never drags. Now let me get this straight, I adore every single book in this series and I've given them all 5 stars, but I do acknowledge that some of them have had some overly convoluted plots, network effect, and sometimes it's hard to follow, but this book doesn't have any of those problems. I was never confused reading this book. And the way that this book finishes up with Murderbot in a stronger emotional place, but also still with all of this cast of characters that we're growing to love over the series, makes me so excited for the next book. If I was ranking the Murderbot Diaries series, I think I'd rank this one at the top. It's even better than anything we've gotten before. It really builds on all of the previous entries of the series while also feeling like its own standalone adventure that wraps up nicely and is strong because of that. With a complete story that doesn't rely on anything else while also making everything else matter because it's building on that foundation. I would give System Collapse 5 stars. And if you enjoyed this video, you'll probably want to watch next my review of Witch King, which is this author's other release of the year.